You probably think you know exactly how wars are won. I mean, most people do, right?
Right, yeah. It just feels like common sense at this point.
You think the side with the biggest guns, the most money, they just automatically win. You find the enemy, you destroy the enemy, plant your flag in the rubble, and, go home.
Which is exactly how the history books write it.
Yeah.
But it's fundamentally flawed.
It's completely, utterly wrong. And here is the ultimate face-slapping reality of modern combat. The United States military literally admits this publicly.
Yeah, it's a terrifying realization for, any global superpower.
They admit that destroying the enemy cannot win a long-term victory. It's just strategically impossible. You literally cannot shoot your way to a lasting peace.
Right, which brings us to the core of today's deep dive.
Exactly. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are unpacking a massive, groundbreaking report from the RAND Corporation. The title is pretty dense. It's called Developing an Army Strategy for Building Partner Capacity for Stability Operations.
I know, it sounds like a dry academic textbook. But the implications hidden inside those pages, they are explosive.
Our mission today is to figure out a bizarre paradox. We are going to understand why the most powerful military in human history realized that it desperately needs weak nations to do its heavy lifting.
We really have to start with the words of former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates. He looked at the global landscape and basically saw the writing on the wall.
Right. He issued this massive strategic warning to the entire defense establishment.
He stated plainly that the United States has to stop the collapse of failed states. Because if we sit back and watch them collapse, well, the outcome is mathematically certain. We will inevitably be sending our own soldiers to fight their insurgencies.
Because hard power has diminishing returns. I mean, you can drop all the precision-guided bombs you want. You can wipe out every single enemy compound. But, bombs do not build governments. Missiles don't pave roads.
Exactly. And we need to anchor this in reality for you, the listener. You might be wondering why this massive shift in military doctrine actually impacts your life.
It changes the entire global security framework.
Right. The old rules of warfare are dead. A superpower can win a kinetic battle in a matter of minutes.
Right.
But they can completely lose the decade-long peace that follows. I mean, we've seen this play out.
So why should you care? Because your tax dollars are actively funding this machine. Your personal global security is at stake here. The stability of the entire global economy rests on this military doctrine that is fundamentally shifting away from search and destroy.
It's moving entirely toward build and support, soft power, but, with a very hard edge.
So let's unpack this shift. Let's start with the capability vacuum.
The structural gap in the U.S. Army.
Right. The U.S. Army has the most lethal, heavy armored divisions on the planet. I mean, they have Abrams tanks, they have Apache helicopters, they can obliterate a target from over the horizon with terrifying precision. But what happens when the shooting stops?
They hit a complete brick wall.
What happens when they need to fix a broken sewer system in a war zone? Or, what happens when they need to set up a local police force in a shattered city?
It's just complete institutional paralysis.
Because for decades, the military treated anything other than full-scale combat as a complete afterthought, right?
Yeah, they called them small wars or operations other than war. It was almost a derogatory term inside the Pentagon. Like, real soldiers fought tank battles. They didn't hand out grain or train local cops.
I look at this and I instantly think of a surgical team. Imagine you're using a 10-pound sledgehammer to do delicate brain surgery.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You have the absolute best, most expensive sledgehammer in the entire world, but your patient is bleeding out. Your patient needs tiny, delicate stitches.
And you obviously cannot stitch a wound with a sledgehammer. The military is engineered for destruction. They excel at breaking things. But rebuilding a shattered society requires an entirely different toolkit.
It requires something called civil security and civil control.
Right. Which leads us to the doctrinal shift. After the intense fallout of Iraq and Afghanistan, the Department of Defense finally woke up. They looked at the rubble. They realized they completely lacked the technical skills to rebuild. They lacked the cultural understanding. They lacked the linguistic fluency.
So they updated Field Manual 3.0.
This was a seismic event in military history. They elevated stability operations to be just as important as offensive and defensive operations, like equal footing.
They basically admitted that if you do not have the tools to help a nation govern itself, every single military victory just leads directly to another insurgency.
You're just trapped in an endless loop of violence. You win the battle, you leave, the state collapses, the insurgents take over. And then you have to go back and fight the exact same battle 5 years later.
But wait, if the military suddenly realizes they need to rebuild nations, shouldn't they just hire experts to do it? Like, why is an infantry commander trying to figure out municipal water rights?
Because of the interagency war. The people with the blueprints are sitting in Washington. The people with the guns are sitting in the desert.
Let's talk about who is actually in charge of fixing a broken country.
On paper, the authority doesn't belong to the military at all. It belongs to the State Department.
Right. The White House issued National Security Presidential Directive 44. This piece of paper made the State Department the absolute lead agency for stability operations.
And the military followed suit. They issued Department of Defense Directive 3000.05. It states very clearly that the military should merely support the State Department's efforts.
But here is the fatal disconnect. And this is the reality that will absolutely make your blood boil. The State Department has the legal mandate. They have the supreme authority to dictate how a country is rebuilt.
But they are massively understaffed. They do not have an expeditionary workforce ready to just deploy into a hostile war zone.
And they are completely underfunded compared to the military.
Right. Meanwhile, the military has hundreds of thousands of personnel. They have massive billion-dollar budgets. They have a global logistics network that can move mountains of supplies in 24 hours.
But they are not legally allowed to be in charge of the rebuilding.
It is a bureaucratic nightmare of epic proportions.
I mean, imagine hiring a brilliant architect. This architect has the perfect blueprints for a skyscraper, but he doesn't employ a single construction worker. He has no cranes. He has no cement.
Right. And right next door, you hire a massive construction crew. They have thousands of workers, unlimited cement, but they are legally forbidden from looking at the architect's blueprints.
So what happens? The construction crew just starts pouring cement randomly so they look busy, and the building inevitably collapses.
The real-world consequences of this disconnect are just devastating. We end up with a fractured ad hoc system. The United States only reacts to crises after they explode.
There's no unified long-term strategy for building up partner nations at all.
No. The RAND researchers looked really hard at the data. They examined 94 core security assistance projects. These are massive initiatives designed to build global stability.
Out of 94 projects, do you know how many the Army actually had control over?
Just 15.
15. The Army is doing the dying on the ground. The Army is taking the casualties. But the civilian bureaucrats, thousands of miles away, hold the purse strings and all the policy levers.
The system burns through billions of dollars in the war zone, but it fails to build genuine, lasting capability in the partner nation because the people with the money and the people with the manpower are not working for the same playbook.
Okay, so let's say we actually get everyone on the same page. The military and the State Department finally agree to work together to rebuild a broken country. Where do you even start?
Well, you need a blueprint for a nation.
Yeah.
You have to map out exactly what you are trying to build.
Right, like, do you build a school first? Do you build a central bank? Do you build a police station?
The government has complex matrices for this. The State Department divides the rebuilding of a nation into 5 distinct technical sectors.
And then the Department of Defense translates those into 6 major mission elements.
Exactly. Those 6 elements are the core of military stability operations. Number 1, a safe and secure environment. Number 2, governance and rule of law.
Number 3 is humanitarian assistance. 4 is infrastructure. 5 is economic development. And 6 is strategic communications.
But the absolute non-negotiable foundation is number 1, a safe and secure environment.
Civil security. Like physically protecting the civilian population from violence.
Because without security, the other 5 elements are physically impossible to execute.
Right. If you don't have armed guards protecting a construction site, you cannot build a power plant. Every single dollar you spend on a brand new school is just funding a future pile of rubble. You aren't building infrastructure. You are literally just building targets for insurgents.
Sequencing is everything in stability operations. The military must first create civil security. They must neutralize the immediate threats. Then they must establish civil control, which means regulating the behavior of the population and stopping rampant crime.
Only after the streets are safe can the civilian agencies from the State Department step in to write laws and, stimulate the economy.
If the military fails step 1, the entire project collapses. But if the military knows security is step 1, they must have a massive, highly detailed system for tracking how well they secure these areas, right?
You definitely think so. You'd assume the Pentagon has a dashboard tracking every single training exercise down to the last billet.
But they don't. And this brings us to the database of broken dreams.
This part of the RAND report is genuinely shocking to me. The military spends millions of dollars every single year. They run hundreds of training exercises around the globe. They deploy special forces teams to South America. They send trainers to Africa.
Yeah, they're constantly moving chess pieces across the board.
But if you open the combatant commanders' databases to see what they actually accomplished, you will find a terrifying secret.
It is all just a bunch of blank spreadsheets.
Literally blank. RAND analyzed the data from the U.S. Southern Command. This is Southcom, right? The military command responsible for Latin America and the Caribbean.
They pulled the records from the Theater Security Cooperation Management Information System for the years 2005 and 2006.
The TSCMIS database. It's supposed to be the central nervous system for tracking military cooperation.
And the data they found was an absolute catastrophe.
Whole columns were just empty. Event descriptions were completely missing. Funding information entirely absent.
Countless training events were simply marked completed in the system.
But no one had any idea what was actually achieved.
Right, like, did the partner nation's military get better at shooting? Did they learn how to manage a logistics supply chain? Did they reduce human rights violations?
Nobody knows. The database literally cannot tell you if the training worked.
This is a classic case of a broken tracking mechanism.
It is exactly like a corporate gym program. Imagine a company buys gym memberships for all its employees. Every morning, the employees swipe their cards at the front desk. The computer logs the swipe. The company looks at the spreadsheet and says, "Wow, our employees are so fit. Look at all these completed gym visits."
But the computer doesn't track what happens inside the gym.
Exactly. The employees could be swiping their card, walking to the locker room, sitting on a bench for an hour, eating donuts, and then leaving. The database marks them as completed, but nobody's tracking if they actually lifted a single weight. Nobody is tracking if their cholesterol went down.
That is the ultimate danger of garbage in, garbage out in military planning.
I mean, how can the Pentagon make global strategic decisions when their baseline data is garbage?
They cannot. If their database can't differentiate between a simple American handout like dropping off a pallet of rifles and true lasting capacity building, they are flying blind.
Yeah.
They will constantly throw money at the wrong problems.
But let's talk about the actual math. Because when capacity building does work, the price tag of peace is absolutely fascinating.
Oh, it's one of the most compelling arguments for shifting to this strategy.
Do you want to know exactly how much it costs to buy stability in Africa?
RAND calculated it down to the precise dollar.
And the math is a massive reversal of how we normally think about military spending. Let's look at a specific initiative, the ACOTA program, the African Contingency Operations Training and Assistance Program.
ACOTA is a prime example of building partner capacity. The goal is to train African militaries to handle their own regional crises so American troops do not have to intervene.
If the U.S. wants to train and equip one single 600-person African battalion using purely American trainers, it costs about $1.2 million for the training itself.
And you have to add another $1 million for non-lethal equipment, uniforms, radios, medical gear.
So you are looking at roughly $2.2 million. That breaks down to about $3,700 per soldier.
Which, in the grand scheme of the Pentagon's budget, is incredibly cheap.
But here's the magic number. This is where the strategy proves its worth. Once that partner nation learns how to train itself.
Once they have institutionalized the knowledge, right? Once the students become the teachers.
The United States stops sending massive teams of expensive trainers. We pull back. We just send a few observers to make sure they are sticking to the curriculum.
And the cost completely plummets.
It drops from over $2 million down to just $150,000.
That is a staggering return on investment.
We are talking about a fraction of the cost of a single American cruise missile. I mean, a single Tomahawk missile costs over $2 million, and it explodes once. For that exact same price, you get an entire self-sustaining battalion of soldiers that can keep the peace in their own backyard for years.
This is the exact definition of building partner capacity. You are not fighting their wars for them. You are making them completely self-sufficient.
So American troops do not have to deploy at all.
But of course, there's a massive catch.
There is always a catch when it comes to execution. Let's talk about the outsourced strategy, the contractor crutch.
Right. Who is actually flying to Africa to train these battalions?
If you are an average taxpayer listening to this, you'd probably assume it's active duty U.S. military heroes, elite soldiers wearing the American flag on their shoulder.
That would be the logical assumption. You want your absolute best soldiers training your allies.
But you would be completely wrong.
Because the U.S. military was stretched to the absolute breaking point, fighting massive counterinsurgencies in places like Iraq and Afghanistan.
They simply could not spare active duty troops to go train partners in Africa. Every single combat-ready brigade was in the Middle East.
So what was the Pentagon's solution?
Private contractors?
The U.S. government sends teams of 15 to 20 private contractors to do the job.
These are usually retired, enlisted military and former officers. They are highly skilled, yes, but they do not wear the uniform anymore. They work for corporations.
They are doing the heavy lifting of U.S. foreign policy on a contractual basis.
Now contrast this with our European allies. Look at France. Look at the United Kingdom.
They take a fundamentally different approach to military advising.
They deeply embed their active duty military into partner nations. The UK does this in Sierra Leone. France does this across its former colonies in West Africa.
They stay for the long term. Because of their historic colonial ties, they view military advising as a permanent strategic mission. They wear the uniforms of the partner nations sometimes.
So I have to ask the really difficult question here. Are we basically outsourcing our long-term geopolitical influence to retirees because our active military is too busy putting out immediate fires?
Yes, that is exactly what the difference in mechanisms reveals. Our allies are playing a multi-decade geopolitical game.
And the United States.
The U.S. system relies on private contractors to plug an immediate bleeding gap in manpower.
I mean, it works for basic mechanical training. A contractor can absolutely teach a soldier how to clean a rifle.
But it completely lacks the deep institutional military-to-military bonding that builds decade-long alliances.
Think about the psychology on the ground. When a French active duty officer goes to train an African unit, he lives in the garrison. He speaks the language. He wears a military uniform. If things go wrong, they bleed together. It is a brotherhood.
But when a U.S. contractor flies in, it is a financial transaction. They run a 90-day training course, they tack their bags, and they fly home to Florida.
There is zero lasting psychological bond. But wait, why doesn't the U.S. Army just assign more active duty officers to be advisors? Why rely on contractors at all?
Because in the U.S. military, going to train a weak nation is basically career suicide.
You have to explain that mechanism, because to a civilian, that sounds insane. If the government says building partner capacity is their top priority, why would it ruin your career to do it?
It all comes down to the promotion board culture. In the French military, being a foreign military advisor is a core requirement for promotion. If you want to be a top general in Paris, you must prove you can navigate the complex politics of advising an African battalion. It proves you have strategic vision.
But in the American system,
every ambitious U.S. officer knows the unwritten truth of the performance review system. If you want a star on your shoulder, you command a heavy combat brigade. You maneuver tanks.
Yeah.
You orchestrate massive firepower.
you go break things.
Exactly. If you get assigned to go train a fragile state's army, the promotion board views you as sidelined. You stepped off the competitive combat leadership track. You are babysitting.
It is an institutional punishment.
It is a devastating human resources disaster. The Pentagon desperately needs to build partner capacity to save our own troops from deploying, but their own internal promotion system actively punishes the elite officers who actually do the building.
We are defeating our own grand strategy before it even starts. We are sending our B team, or we are sending contractors because our A team is terrified of ruining their resumes.
But, when the system does manage to align and we do commit the right resources, the results can be genuinely miraculous.
Yes, let's talk about the bird flu miracle, because this proves the sheer power of doing it right.
This is a perfect, meticulously documented case study from the RAND report.
Can a cheap tabletop game played in a boring conference room stop a deadly global pandemic?
In 2006, it absolutely did.
The United States military runs this low-profile initiative called the Civil Military Emergency Preparedness Program, CMEP.
It's not about shooting guns at all. It is about bureaucratic readiness. In 2005, CMEP hosted a tabletop exercise in Romania. It was called TOMAS.
And it cost practically nothing. Maybe $350,000 to $400,000 total.
Which is absolute pocket change for the Pentagon. It is less than the cost of fuel for a bomber flight.
So what did they do with that money? They didn't build anything. They just flew in some experts, rented a room near the Black Sea, and forced Romanian cabinet ministers and military generals to sit together and play a complex game of what if.
Right. Day one, what if a massive earthquake hits? Day two, what if a catastrophic flood destroys the coastal infrastructure? Day three, who is actually in charge of the response?
And the exercise exposed terrifying, catastrophic flaws in Romania's system. The game forced them to confront reality.
Romania discovered they had no functional earthquake insurance system. They had no flood insurance system.
Their military forces were only trained to fight literal fires. They had zero training or legal authority to manage complex, cascading disasters that crossed civilian lines.
Because of this incredibly cheap paper exercise, the Romanian government panicked. But they panicked in a productive way.
They looked in the mirror and realized they were incredibly vulnerable to the next crisis.
So they completely restructured their national government. They took the lessons from the tabletop exercise and formed an entirely new agency, the General Inspectorate for Emergency Situations, the GIEs.
But they didn't stop there. They went to the World Bank and the United Nations, armed with the data from the U.S. exercise, and secured a massive loan. They built an entirely new disaster response system from scratch.
And the timing of this bureaucratic reform was critical.
Because the very next year, in 2006, a massive bird flu outbreak hit Romania, the H5N1 virus. It was a crisis that could have easily spiraled into a devastating regional pandemic.
But because of the new GIE system they had just built, the system inspired entirely by the CMEP tabletop exercise, Romania successfully mobilized their interagency resources and contained the crisis.
A $350,000 paper exercise literally saved thousands of lives. It stopped a pandemic in its tracks.
That is the ultimate butterfly effect in geopolitics.
That is the absolute proof of concept for capacity building. The U.S. military did not fly in medical helicopters. We did not send American doctors to fix the bird flu for them.
We couldn't have. We wouldn't have had the jurisdiction or the speed.
The U.S. forced Romania to realize their own weakness, and Romania fixed itself.
And it goes even deeper than that single exercise. Through other educational networks, like the alumni of the George C. Marshall Center in Germany, the U.S. builds these invisible, really powerful webs of influence.
Oh, the Marshall Center is fascinating. It's essentially a U.S. and German-funded university for foreign military officers and government officials.
Right. They run a 3-week course on peace support and stability operations. They bring in elites from fragile or transitioning nations, educate them, and send them home.
And the long-term payoff is massive. In Romania, the alumni of the Marshall Center were so motivated that they self-funded and organized a massive energy security summit on the Black Sea. They even got the Romanian president to attend.
And this wasn't just a friendly chat. They brought in officials from neighboring countries, and they even brought in representatives from Gazprom, the massive Russian state-owned energy corporation. They had intense debates about regional energy independence right there at the summit.
Think about the leverage there. Without deploying a single combat soldier, the United States empowered a network of Romanian elites to push back against Russian energy dominance in their own backyard.
It is soft power with a hard edge. It is the exact definition of shaping the geopolitical environment through partner capacity.
But it raises a massive question. If this strategy is so effective, who do we choose to help? We cannot afford to run tabletop exercises and fund university courses for every single country on Earth.
No. And this is where the math of the RAND report gets absolutely brutal. We have to filter the world.
Which brings us to the good ally paradox. It is the 14% problem.
Common sense dictates that your richest, strongest allies are your best partners in a global crisis.
Right. You want the rich kids on your team. You want the countries with massive GDPs and advanced fighter jets.
But the data says they are completely irrelevant to this specific strategy of stability operations.
RAND built a massive mathematical model to evaluate potential coalition partners globally.
They fed 160 different countries into an algorithm to see who the U.S. Army should prioritize for capacity building.
Out of that massive sample of 160 countries, do you know how many scored highly as ideal coalition partners? Only 22 countries?
Just 14% of the globe.
But here is the kicker. Here is the paradox. 18 of those 22 countries are advanced industrial states, places like Germany, Japan, the UK.
They are already rich. They are already militarily powerful.
They do not need U.S. capacity building. They don't need our tabletop exercises or our contractor training.
Meanwhile, nearly 75% of the world's countries score abysmally low on the RAND model. They fall below 0.5 on the scale.
This is a mind-bending contradiction. The countries that actually need our help to build capacity are mathematically terrible partners on paper.
And the ones who look amazing on paper don't need our help at all.
So if the rich don't need us and the poor are terrible partners, what do?
We have to find the sweet spot in the data.
We are looking for nations that are weak enough to actually need American assistance, but capable enough to absorb the training and use it effectively.
The math is unforgiving. You cannot pour water into a shattered glass. If a country is too broken, your training just leaks out into corruption.
Which brings us to a specific metric, the $20,000 threshold.
The quality formula. This is how RAND filters out the shattered glasses.
Imagine a country goes on television. They boast that they have a massive army of 1 million men. They do huge military parades with thousands of marching soldiers.
Should you, as a U.S. military planner, partner with them?
Not if they are completely broke.
Right. A massive, unfunded army is not a military force. It is a heavily armed mob waiting for a paycheck. It is a coup waiting to happen.
So how does the RAND mathematical model measure actual military quality?
It is notoriously hard to measure objectively across 160 vastly different countries.
Yeah.
You can't just count tanks because half the tanks might be rusted shut.
But they created a brilliant proxy metric.
Military spending per troop.
They divide the nation's total defense budget by the number of active personnel. And the threshold they found is exactly $20,000.
If a country spends less than $20,000 per soldier annually, they are failing the most basic test of military readiness.
Think about what that money actually buys. It is not just salary. If you spend less than $20,000 per soldier, you are not paying them enough to survive without taking bribes from local warlords. You are not buying them boots that survive a monsoon. You are not buying bullets for live fire training so they will miss their targets in a real firefight. You are definitely not maintaining the engines in their transport trucks.
It is exactly like a guy bragging about owning a fleet of Ferraris, but he cannot afford a single gallon of gas to put in them. The capability is an illusion.
This ruthless math is necessary for survival.
Because in stability operations, you do not need millions of untrained bodies holding rusty rifles. That actually makes a fragile state more dangerous.
You need disciplined, sustained, professional forces. Because these soldiers have to interact with civilians. They have to police streets. They have to enforce the rule of law without becoming criminals themselves.
The $20,000 threshold instantly filters out the paper tigers. It clears the board of the illusion of capability. If they don't meet the financial threshold, the U.S. should not waste resources trying to integrate them into a high-end combat coalition.
But capability is only half the battle. You can have a well-funded army, but that doesn't mean they will actually fight.
You also need willingness.
This is the problem of the ghost armies. What good is the best trained, best funded army in the world if their politicians refuse to let them leave the barracks?
The RAND model does not just measure capability. It measures a nation's political willingness to deploy their troops overseas.
You can have a highly capable regional power. They have the troops. They have the money. They easily pass the $20,000 threshold. But if their willingness to deploy to international coalitions or UN peacekeeping missions is zero,
they are entirely useless to a U.S. strategy that relies on burden sharing.
I want you to think about your own friend group. It is exactly like the friend who owns a massive, pristine pickup truck. But conveniently, he hurts his back every single time you need to move a couch to a new apartment.
The physical capability is there. The willingness is absolute zero.
You have countries with massive armies who completely refuse to deploy.
But look at the data on United Nations peacekeeping missions. This is where the model reveals a massive blind spot in traditional U.S. thinking. Who actually sends troops to dangerous UN missions in Africa and in the Middle East?
It is not the rich Western nations. The U.S. and Europe hardly send any frontline infantry to UN missions.
It is Pakistan, it is India, it is Bangladesh.
They send thousands upon thousands of troops to UN missions.
Their willingness is off the charts.
Yeah.
Why? Because the UN actively pays them for it. The UN provides a subsidy per soldier. For a developing nation, deploying troops to a UN mission is actually a source of national income and a way to get their troops real-world experience funded by the international community.
But look at the regional powers. Look at China, Russia, Turkey, Indonesia.
High capability, massive armies, good equipment.
But when RAND plots them on a graph for coalition operations, they cluster in the absolute bottom right corner. high capability, but extremely low willingness to join U.S.-led stability operations.
This forces military planners to stop staring at raw troop counts on a map.
You have to look at the geopolitical reality. 1 million Chinese soldiers are not going to deploy to help the U.S. stabilize a Middle Eastern country.
You have to design completely different strategic approaches. You cannot use the same diplomatic playbook for a highly capable state that refuses to help, versus a weaker state like Bangladesh that is eagerly begging to deploy for UN subsidies.
And this leads right into the third variable. We have capability, we have willingness. Now we need the appropriateness filter.
The regional surprises.
Why do some regions of the world look like absolute gold mines for U.S. alliances, while others look like geopolitical dead ends?
It comes down to a metric Rand calls appropriateness.
Appropriateness measures democratization. It measures strategic affinity with the United States. Do they vote with us at the United Nations General Assembly? Do they share our core political values?
Globally, the picture is bleak. Over 50% of countries fall into the bottom half of the appropriateness scale.
Most of the world does not align with American interests.
But look at the Southcom region, Latin America and the Caribbean.
Only 13% of the countries in that region are at the bottom of the scale.
They are highly democratic. They align very well with U.S. diplomatic interests. They are culturally compatible.
But what is the tragedy here?
Many of them completely lack the hard military capability. They do not hit the $20,000 quality threshold. They have tiny defense budgets and outdated equipment.
It is a cruel, bitter irony of geopolitics. The nations that actually like us, the ones that share our values and want to partner with us, do not have the military muscle.
And the ones with the massive military muscle, the regional heavyweights, often do not share our values and refuse to deploy.
This is exactly why Southcom is a prime target for targeted capacity building.
The political willingness is already there. The appropriateness is already there. The foundation of trust exists.
If the U.S. can just inject the capability, if we can provide the training and the funding to get them over that $20,000 threshold,
the return on investment will be staggering. You are pushing on an open door. You are turning a friendly neighbor into a highly capable security partner.
But sometimes the U.S. military can't even see the door, even when the perfect partner is standing right in front of them.
Because of the bureaucratic blind spots. The tyranny of the map.
Did you know that arbitrary lines drawn on a map by bureaucrats in Washington can actually blind the military to its best potential allies?
It is a massive structural flaw in how the Department of Defense organizes the world.
The U.S. military divides the entire globe into regional fiefdoms called combatant commands.
You have EUCOM for Europe, AFRICOM for Africa, CENTCOM for the Middle East, PACOM for the Pacific, SOUTHCOM for Latin America.
But some countries fall right on the seams between these commands. They sit on the borders.
Countries like Turkey, Egypt, India.
Because they sit directly on these bureaucratic fault lines, their strategic value gets miscalculated. Or worse, completely ignored in the budget process.
It entirely depends on which four-star general's desk you are looking at. CENTCOM might view Egypt as a crucial anchor for Middle East stability, but AFRICOM might view Egypt as a distraction from sub-Saharan issues.
Think of it like two rival corporate departments, sales and marketing. There is a massive million-dollar client sitting right between them. But neither department wants to spend their own budget to secure the client because they know the other department might get the year-end bonus for it. So they both ignore the client, and a rival company steals them.
Geopolitical reality does not care about Department of Defense organizational charts.
A terrorist network does not stop at the edge of a map boundary just because they crossed from CENTCOM into AFRICOM.
This is why the Army desperately needs a global, objective model to prioritize partners. They need an algorithm that transcends these bureaucratic fiefdoms.
They can't rely on regional wish lists generated by isolated commanders fighting for a slice of the budget. They need the RAND model to look at the whole board.
And the model goes further. It doesn't just look for capable coalition partners. It also evaluates the exact opposite end of the spectrum, the fragile states.
Right. There are dozens of countries on the verge of total collapse. If the U.S. is going to intervene to stop a failed state, how do they choose which one? They can't save everyone.
RAND created a fragile states model with 5 strict filters. If a collapsing country does not pass these filters, the U.S. should not heavily invest in stability operations there.
Filter 1, oil and gas. Do they control a significant percentage of global energy reserves? Because if they collapse, the global economy panics.
Filter 2, terrorism. Has the country been the staging ground for terror attacks against U.S. targets? If yes, it is a direct homeland security threat.
Filter 3, drugs. Are they a major producer of illicit narcotics? Because drug cartels thrive in failed states and fund global instability.
Filter 4, proximity. Are they geographically close to the U.S. homeland or a core ally? A collapse on your border is an immediate crisis.
And filter 5, bases. Does the U.S. rely on military bases in that country for global force projection?
By applying those 5 ruthless filters, Rand narrowed down a massive list of failing states to just a handful of critical priorities. Countries like Afghanistan, Colombia, Iraq, Pakistan, and Nigeria.
It gives the military a cold, calculated priority list instead of just reacting to whatever humanitarian crisis is on the news that week. But here is the paradox of fragility. The ones who need us most hate us most.
Yes, there's a massive negative correlation between how fragile a state is and how willing they are to accept U.S. help.
The RAND model shows that out of 31 countries in the alert zone for state failure, 28 of them score abysmally low on acceptance of U.S. presence.
Places like Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, they are collapsing, but their governments and their citizens are deeply hostile to American intervention.
It's a nightmare scenario if a country is fragile but hostile and the U.S. tries to force capacity building.
The resources just get swallowed by corruption and infighting. Look at the Middle East versus Africa.
Right. In CISOCOM, the Middle East, even traditional U.S. allies score terribly on acceptance of Democrats' institutional changes. They want our guns, but they hate our rules.
Whereas in Africa, you have massive fragility, but a bit more openness, although a severe lack of capability. It's a brutal trade-off for U.S. planners.
But even if we pick the perfect partners using these models, how do we know if the training actually works? We are back to the database problem. Assessing the unassessable.
This is the hardest part of stability operations. It is the holy grail of military metrics.
How do you measure a disaster that didn't happen?
How do you prove to Congress that your $10 million training program successfully stopped a civil war?
You cannot take a photograph of a war that did not occur. You can't show a politician a pile of bodies that don't exist.
Rand proposes a strict, non-negotiable 6-step framework to stop the madness of those blank Southcom databases. We have to fundamentally change what we measure.
We have to start measuring success by how many meetings we hold or how many flights we booked.
Step 1. You must meticulously track inputs. Exactly how much money and how much U.S. manpower went into the project.
Step 2. You must track outputs, not just we held a training. How many specific foreign units were actually trained to a certifiable standard?
Step 3. You must track outcomes. This is the big one. Did the partner nation actually change their behavior? Were new laws passed? Did they secure a UN loan like Romania did? Did human rights abuses in their police force drop by 20%?
Step 4. You must track external factors. Did the global economy collapse while we were training them, rendering the training moot? Did a neighboring country invade?
You must measure actual institutional change over time.
We have to stop rewarding military commanders for just showing up and spending their budget. We have to start demanding absolute proof that the partner nation actually got stronger and more independent.
This requires a total fundamental culture shift in the Pentagon. It requires them to think like long-term investors, not just crisis managers.
Capacity building takes years. Sometimes it takes entire decades. You are rewiring the political and military culture of a sovereign nation.
It requires strategic patience. And unfortunately, patience does not fit neatly into an annual congressional budget cycle.
Politicians want results before the next election. They want to cut a ribbon in 18 months. But building a professional army from the ashes of a civil war takes a generation.
And that profound disconnect leads us to the ultimate question.
The final provocation.
We have spent this entire deep dive talking about how the U.S. needs to fix other countries, how we need to build their capacity.
We have analyzed the math, the RAND models, the 14% paradox, and the failures of the databases.
But what if we have been looking in the wrong direction this whole time?
The premise of the RAND report is crystal clear. No army can shoot its way to a lasting peace. The sledgehammer cannot do brain surgery.
Building up partner nations is the only way the United States can share the global security burden without exhausting its own military and draining its own treasury to absolute zero.
Saving those collapsing states is ultimately how we save ourselves from endless bleeding deployments.
But look at the evidence we just uncovered. We have seen that the U.S. interagency process is deeply fractured. The State Department and the DoD are completely out of sync.
We have seen that the combatant command databases are blank. We don't even know what we're doing successfully.
We have seen that our military promotion system actively punishes the very officers we desperately need to do this job, forcing us to rely on private contractors.
The doctrine is just now catching up to the bloody reality of the 21st century.
So here's something for you to chew on, something that should keep you awake tonight when you think about global security.
Before the United States can successfully build the capacity of its global partners, does it first need to completely rebuild its own capacity to do the job?
Are we even capable of teaching what we have not yet mastered ourselves? We are trying to teach fragile states how to have seamless interagency cooperation, while our own State Department and Defense Department are fighting over budgets and blueprints.
That is the spiral of history. From the jungles of Vietnam to the streets of Somalia to the deserts of Iraq to the mountains of Afghanistan, we keep making the same institutional errors.
We have to critically evaluate the news we see every day. When you see a headline about the U.S. sending millions of dollars to train a foreign military or deploying contractors to Africa,
You have to ask yourself the hard questions. Are we actually building a solid, independent foundation for that country?
or are we just painting over the cracks in our own broken system? Are we just swiping the gym card and hoping for the best?
Think back to the sledgehammer and the surgeon. We love the sledgehammer. We like to think warfare is clean, it is binary, the enemy is broken or not broken.
But the reality of stability operations is murky. It is muddy waters. It requires immense patience and cultural empathy.
You cannot just point a laser at an enemy and destroy them. You have to point to a shattered society and somehow, against all odds, help them heal themselves. And right now, despite all the money and all the power, the U.S. military is still trying to figure out how to be a surgeon.